Chapter 1. Chloe's paw. I leaned forward, trying to ease off the stinging pain on my back, but to no prevail. Whipped. I had been whipped last night. For what, I didn't have a clue, but I never wanted to experience that again. My own dried tears still stuck to my face. Ever since last night, the pet master had tightened my collar, enough so that it made breathing a challenge. I couldn't breathe quietly even if I wanted to. I didn't know what I did to deserve it. I always tried to do what I was told. Well, when it came to the things that I could control, that is. The rest of the pets and I flinched as the lights in the shop suddenly turned on and the loud boom of the door told us that the pet master was entering. Opening time. The rest of the girls scooted back in their cage as the pet master walked by, some even whimpering in cowardice. I just sat there silently, not wanting the pain to return. My eyes only met his for a brief moment before I looked away in sheer fear. The day went on as normal, vampires coming and going as they pleased. Some left with pets while others took supplies instead. I tried to make myself look smaller than usual today, letting my red, unbrushed hair hang in front of my eyes as I stared at the bottom of my cage, not even daring to look at the vampires that were examining me. The bell rang as a new vampire entered the shop, and for some reason, I decided to see what had just walked in. He was tall. He ran his hand through his seemingly naturally waved back, medium-length black hair as his eyes scanned the shop. His eyes were a deep emerald green, a color that I had rarely seen in the other vampires that come in here. He even had a sharp jawline that nicely framed his face. Yet another vampire that could easily show up any human man. "What can I interest you in today?" The pet master spoke to him with his usual lines. I returned my eyes back to the bottom of my cage, still listening to their conversation. It was pretty much the only entertainment I had. "I am looking for a pet," the man said. His voice was low. "Well, sir, I can assure you that we have the finest that this city has to offer. Follow me if you would," the pet master offered. Their footsteps steadily got louder as they inched towards us pets. "Anything particular that you're looking for?" the pet master asked. I shifted my eyes up just enough to see the vampire lazily scanning over each cage. "Not really." I immediately looked back down as our eyes met, a sense of nervousness suddenly crashing over me. His footsteps drew closer to me, making my stomach churn. I didn't want to be bought. I didn't want to be treated like a dog, only to be treated like a snack as soon as he got tired of me. He bent down, meeting my gaze once more. His eyes squinted as he looked over my body. I immediately squirmed to the back of the cage, letting out an exasperated whine as the expected pain shot throughout my body. The man's eyes widened ever so slightly. "What happened to her?" he questioned. The pet master laughed. "Ah, her. That one tends to be a bit of a crybaby when it comes to most things," he mocked. Well, I guess that was one way to put it. The man stood back up, my gaze following him as he did. "So, what's with the lash marks?" he asked. She wouldn't stop crying and it was starting to get annoying, so I gave her something to cry about instead. The pet master responded, looking very pleased with himself. It was quite entertaining, really. The man's brow furrowed, but only for a second. "Age?" he asked. My eyes widened in surprise. He was actually considering buying me. 17. "Who was her breeder?" he asked. Breeders. The vampires who took in the slaves and pets that couldn't perform their duties. The ones that forced them to conceive a few children before taking the child and killing the parents for their blood. The whole process made me want to curl up in a ball and cry. The pet master shook his head. "She doesn't have one. She's a rogue." I was free. Chapter 2. I kept that same distance as we walked out of the shop, my leash in one of my new master's hand, and a bag containing who knows what in the other. I squinted my eyes as we stepped outside, the unfamiliar sunlight hitting my eyes and skin for the first time in what felt like forever. I looked at my master as we kept walking, trying to get a good look at him without risking getting yelled at. As if he was sensing my stare, he turned his head. I quickly avoided my gaze, looking down. I've been told that some masters don't even like their pet to look directly at them, and I really didn't want to get hit or whipped, especially after last night. The warm concrete felt nice against my bare feet. The realization hit me, a lot later than it should have. I had a master now. My entire life just changed, well, whatever's left of my life. That uncertainty of that now lies in the hands of the vampire that's holding my neck by a string. Quite literally. He held the authority now to do whatever he wanted with me. He could rip my throat out and drain me of every last drop of blood I have right here and right now. This time, I did run into him when he suddenly stopped. His emerald eyes trapped mine as I began to step back. I am sorry, master. I nervously sputtered out, only to cover my mouth with my hands as soon as the words came out. I've learned not to speak unless spoken to from the pet master. I squeezed my eyes shut, ready for master to hit me or yank on the leash or something, but he didn't. He did, however, take my wrist in his hand and lead me into the back area of a limo. Most of the vampires traveled like this, the ones in this city did at least. Only specific slaves were chosen to drive them. What I wouldn't do to have that job. I waited until he sat down to take my seat, not wanting to make him unhappy. He gestured for me to sit next to him, and so I did. He set the leash down by me and leaned back, running his hand through his hair as he let out a long sigh. The drive was silent. It made my nerves on edge. I leaned forward, trying once again to ease the pain on my back. Only then did I realize how loud my breaths were. My hand trailed up to the collar that was pressing into my skin. I immediately put my hand back down when I saw master shift his gaze to me. One wrong move. One wrong move and I'm dead. I kept my eyes on the floor, trying not to make him mad. A sharp gasp exited my throat and I flinched as I felt his hands on my collar. This was weird though. His hands were gentle as he loosened the buckle before removing the collar completely, finally allowing me to get a decent breath. My hands skimmed against the raw skin on my neck where the collar had been rubbing. It was uncomfortable, but dang, I was just happy to have that thing off. I wanted to thank my master, but I didn't know if I should. He was just staring at me, well, my neck. Either the collar make a noticeable mark on my skin, or he's trying to imagine how much he's going to enjoy biting into it. It could be both. You don't talk much, do you? He asked, his voice startling me. I haven't actually talked in about 5 years, so no, do I have permission? I asked nervously. I just wanted to make sure, so I wouldn't mess up in the future. He paused for a second. To me, yes, he said. That's odd. I met his gaze, those eyes piercing through me once again. I didn't even know what to say. Name? He finally spoke. Pets were never really given names, it has always been up to their master to decide. Whatever you want it to be, Ma. No. He cut me off, making me flinch. He sighed. You were a rogue, right? He asked. I was, I replied shamefully. It was my dad's idea to leave the city in the first place. I didn't even want to leave. So what was your name before you got captured? I blinked at him. It had been so long that I had to think about it for a second. Chloe, I said. He thought my answer over. Chloe. He repeated, like he was tasting it on his tongue, I like it. Chapter 3. I couldn't keep my eyes from wandering once we entered the castle. It was so much bigger on the inside, large chandeliers here and there, golden window frames with large red curtains, and a high ceiling. We passed a huge room with a large table, which I'm guessing would be the dining room. There were bloodsuckers in every direction, some with pets, some with slaves, some with both. I met eyes with a couple of pets as we made our way down the corridor. They were all dressed so differently. Some had a total set of clothes while some were practically naked. Master didn't seem to care at all about the other vampires glancing his direction, and then at me. It made me nervous. I kept my head down for the rest of the walk, figuring I could look around later. Or maybe I'd be dead by then. After a few turns and a couple sets of spiral stairs later, Master stopped in front of a very tall door. This hallway was littered with the same doors, one about every 100 or so feet. He placed his thumb on the little black box above the door handle before a small click was heard and he opened the door. I gawked as soon as I stepped foot into the room. It was huge. A very spacious bed stood pressed against the wall, its sheets a dark shade of maroon. On the left was a large window with the same color curtains, following a set of fancy, light gray couches surrounding a glass coffee table. To the right was a wide desk, with tons of organized files and papers, and next to that was a very tall bookshelf. There were two other doors, smaller than the first one. One, I'm guessing, would be the bathroom, and the other one. Maybe a closet? I turned my head to the left again and paused as I saw the thing sitting in the corner. A cage. It didn't look that much bigger than the one I've lived in for the past 5 years. I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat as I spotted the whip, muzzle, and a couple other things that were usually used on pets sitting on top of it. I jumped out of my thoughts as I felt his fingers graze against my neck. My head turned to see him lean down a bit so he could get a better look. I just watched in a nervous confusion as he slipped the collar from around my neck. My muscles tensed as his fingers began to trace where my old collar used to be, a slight pain radiating from it. "We'll have to fix this," his husky voice said, still looking at my neck. I just continued to stare, not knowing what else to do, or what I should do. Fix what? The mark on my neck, or the fact that it hasn't had a set of fangs buried into it before? The later one seemed more logical. He removed his hand from my neck and leaned up, making his way over to the desk. I just stood there, unsure of what to do. "Dinner is in 30 minutes, so go ahead and take a shower," he said, setting my collar and leash on the desk. "I'll have some clothes ready for you by the time you get out, just set the ones you have on now on the sink." My eyes went wide. I didn't think masters let their pets shower, at least, a lot of the pets here didn't look like they have. "You remember how to work a shower, right?" he asked, turning his head towards me. I only nodded. It had been a while, but I was sure that I could figure it out. I cautiously made my way towards the bathroom. Master opened the door, gesturing me in. "There's a box in there full of things you can use. Come on out when you're done." My eyes furrowed. He was oddly nicer than he was earlier. Maybe not nicer, but just calmer. This whole thing made me skeptical. I opted myself to speak, figuring that he would want me to. "I will. Thank you, Master," my quiet voice said. His eyes furrowed this time, causing my nerves to skyrocket. Did I do something wrong? Did he not want me to speak? I thought that earlier he said that I could. "Don't call me that when we're in here," he mumbled. I stumbled for words. What would you prefer, Ma?" I quickly bit my lip, preventing me from finishing that word. His eyes shifted upward in thought for a few moments in thought. "Nico," he said.